Greetings to everyone. My name is Kanthi Ford, and I chair the International Panel for the Pipeline Industries Guild. So welcome to the second session of our innovation series, which will be running all the way through next year. And this one is called The Appetite for Innovation. So I'm very excited to be able to be presenting to you today two great speakers. So just a little bit about the international panel first. Our sort of mission is to start to change the thinking of people in the pipeline industry worldwide. You know, it's the most siloed industry that I've ever worked in. So everybody's busy doing stuff rather than actually thinking about how they could do stuff more effectively or better, because there'll be somebody else out there doing that thinking. So we're trying to share best practices and the issues that are being raised internationally, because our members are traveling all over the world. Our members are working on all sorts of projects. So we're going to be showcasing some of those projects and identifying how those projects are working well, and try and understand why they're not working in other parts of the world. You know, what's contributing to it and what's getting in the way. So that's what we're here to do. And we're going to look at today about whether the utility sector is going to be slow to adopt new technologies. And I have two fabulous speakers who I've known for some time now. And they're doing some amazing things very quietly in the background of various industries in Europe at the moment. So just to tell you a little bit about me, because people just say that I chair the international panel. So I actually work for a company called Satamana KFVC, and we advise companies strategically on change management and leadership development. So it fits really well into the innovation space, because we're working with leaders of companies globally to think and behave differently to actually encourage innovation. Our first speaker today is Stella. Stella Matthews is going to be talking to us about innovation in the utilities sector. And Stella's got a very quiet but very active part in an awful lot of public affairs and policy decision making in the UK. I meet up with her. I hear about her working with all sorts of different key influencers in our country at the moment. So I'd be really interested to hear a little bit more about what Stella's actually doing, as well as her presentation. And then finally, we've got Dr. Shobana Sivenendran, who is based in Germany, and she's going to be talking to us about innovation in the German energy sector. And Shobana's got a really great background too. She's got a PhD in engineering. She's worked in Aurora Energy's research advisory arm, advising on different aspects of energy markets in Britain and Western Europe. And I believe you did a stint in Australia as well, didn't you, for a very short period of time. And yes, and finally, I should also congratulate Stella, because she's just got a first in her MBA. So that's well worth commemorating, because it required an awful lot of work around and about your day job, didn't it? So without further ado, Stella, I'm going to hand over to you. And if you'd like to start your presentation and introduce yourself more fully. We'll take questions at the end. So if anybody has questions, please put them in the chat, and I'll capture them all at the end in the last section of the session. So thank you.
Thank you, Kanthi, and good afternoon, everyone. My name's Stella Matthews. I'm Head of Market and Policy Development at NGen Energy Solutions Limited. A little bit about me: I've been working in the energy industry for 10 years in January, 8 of those years specifically in hydrogen and hydrogen innovation and research and development, and that's seen me undertake a range of roles, including project management, strategy, engagement and development. As Kanthi mentioned, I recently completed my MBA with a specialism in sustainable energy futures, and I also hold a qualification as a systems thinking practitioner. So the organisation I work for, NGen Energy Solutions Limited, they're a hydrogen developer. They construct, own and operate hydrogen assets, and they're currently delivering the largest TAR1 project, Bradford Low Carbon Hydrogen, with JV partners HyGen. So I'm not actually going to talk today about hydrogen. I'm going to talk about digitalisation and digital innovation and digital technologies. So we're actually in the era of digitalisation, or as it's also known, the fourth industrial revolution. We've seen the birth of the internet, social media, smart appliances and AI, and all of those have and continue to drastically change the way that we live our lives. Now, the energy sector is actually quite slow to adopt digitalisation and digital innovation. And in comparison to early movers such as the finance and telecommunications sectors who capitalised on this fourth industrial revolution really early, and they adopted digital tools that have enhanced their operational efficiency and customer engagement. So there is limited market competition within the energy industry and regulated pricing structures. And that could be seen to create a limited need for digital innovation, which is probably one of the reasons why the energy industry hasn't moved on digitalisation and digital innovation as quickly as some other sectors. However, net zero is going to result in the biggest transformation of the energy sector in decades, and it's widely acknowledged that to achieve that, we need to digitalise and we need to innovate using digital tools. And that's actually backed up by Ofgem and BEIS, or DESNZ as they now know, who have over the years offered guidance and support for digitalisation within the sector. And that particular infographic there is a 2021 BEIS infographic, which depicts the actions, barriers, data outputs and benefits that digitalising the energy system for net zero will actually result in. So I'm going to talk you through a case study, and this is a case study that I completed as part of my MBA. I've anonymised the actual company that we're going to look at, the organisation, but the case study is based on a regulated energy distribution company, and we're going to utilise the Kahneman's 2019 mediating assessments protocol and a threats, opportunities, strengths and weaknesses framework. And as you can see, there's 7 steps to this particular case study and this process, and it involves us identifying the digital maturity of the organisation, looking at their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats through the lens of digital maturity, and then looking at how they can overcome those threats and weaknesses and leverage the opportunities and strength to actually digitally transform their organisations. So we make some recommendations of what digital transformation initiatives they might want to pursue moving forwards. So step 1, I've broken up into step 1A and 1B. So if we look at the digital disruption and drivers, as we've already mentioned, there is a limited requirement for the energy industry to digitalise, but this particular organisation did seek to enhance their operational efficiency, support regulatory compliance and meet the emerging environmental mandates that are coming through by digitalising. And they recognised 2 primary drivers for digitalisation within their organisation. Those were the Internet of Things and big data analytics. And they undertook 2 projects, one on each of those drivers, and they reshaped how the organisation collects, stores and analyses data. And that resulted in the optimisation of assets, a reduction in operational costs, and they were able to anticipate maintenance needs more effectively. So if we look at the organisation's response to those digital disruption and drivers, the 2 projects, the Big Data Analytics project and the Internet of Things project, were delivered separately. It was a very fragmented approach. The Big Data Analytics project was delivered and managed by the IT department, while the Internet of Things project was managed and delivered by the innovation team. Now, that approach does not mirror a digital mindset. It's basically 2 standalone initiatives that are being delivered to resolve known problems. And a lack of digital literacy amongst the organisation's leadership team added to that. So when we looked into the organisation, there were gaps in digital governance. So they had separate data, digitalisation, cybersecurity and IT action plans. Now that does align with what regulation requires, but it doesn't support a digital mindset, and there's no coordination or ability being allowed to use digitalisation and digital tools to achieve greater efficiencies across the entire organisation. So if we look at the digital maturity of that particular organisation, they're classed as fashionistas. This is a very early stage of digital maturity, and it sees organisations adopting digital solutions but failing to integrate them into a cohesive strategy and failing to get the added value across the entire organisation that these digital tools and digital innovations can provide. So on to stage 2. An appraisal was undertaken of the organisation's strategic management in the context of digital transformation. So we looked at specific factors and these were appraised. These include strategic direction, governance and structure, top management, strategic organisation, digital maturity and performance, results and attitude. And each individual factor was appraised based on the current organisation's arrangements, its future plans and the organisational approach. Now, what this appraisal revealed is that whilst the organisation's proactive, so it's commenced its digitalisation journey through the 2 projects, the Internet of Things and the Big Data Analytics project, which, as an aside, and to be positive to the organisation, those 2 projects were strongly supported by the senior leadership team. The organisation failed to develop cohesive digital strategies and therefore a digital mindset wasn't implemented across the organisation. So what they've done is mistakenly viewed digitalisation as a standalone transformation instead of a business as usual approach, and that's led to a very disparate and siloed approach to digitalisation and digital transformation. Next, we looked at the organisation's internal digital capabilities and we assessed these. And you can see there's a range of different criteria there, and we looked at whether this was a major weakness or a major strength for the organisation. And based on this assessment, the organisation's internal digital capabilities are actually moderately strong, and this is largely due to initiating those 2 projects. However, there are notable gaps in leveraging the analytics that those projects provide in terms of operational decisions and in using digital technology to develop new business models or to enhance their existing services. Now, on the latter, the enhancing the existing services, there is a limitation in part due to regulatory constraints, so we have to be mindful of that. Following that, we looked at the organisation's internal digital leadership capabilities and assessed these. And as you can see on this particular slide, they are notably weaker in their overall digital leadership capabilities, with digital governance, KPIs, and a unified vision of digital transformation across the organisation being especially weak. So there's a lot to work on in that mindset part of digital transformation for this particular organisation. Following the appraisal and assessment steps, the organisation's threats, opportunities, weaknesses and strengths were identified. Now, within the framework, the high digital maturity section displays the strengths and the low digital maturity section displays the weaknesses, and then you've got the opportunities and threats running down the left-hand side. So if we look at the key strengths, they include the organisation having a first mover advantage, so they were one of the first within their sector to do the Big Data Analytics transformation project, and they followed that up by ongoing adoption of new technologies like AI for efficiency, and they did start to develop a digital mindset and some strategies, but they were very siloed in their approach, and they were investing in digital skills and in skills with people with digital skills within the organisation. However, there are some notable weaknesses. The Big Data Analytics project was mistakenly seen by some within the organisation as the end rather than the start of digitalisation, which led to a siloed approach, as we've mentioned before. That in turn created pockets of hesitation amongst members of the organisation in advancing digital transformation within regulatory limits, while other members of the organisation aggressively pursued emerging technologies without fully assessing what the value was of those to the business or the added value to other areas of the business. The opportunities were presented in the form of external acknowledgement and drive for digitalisation and digital innovation, so they're not regulatory bound to do this, but they decided to do it. But there were threats in terms of new market players who might already have a better grasp on digitalisation than this particular organisation, a lack of guidance and regulation for data digitalisation and digital innovation, and the actual pace of digital technological innovation. We see that every day it's moving faster and faster, things are updating quicker and quicker, and there's a danger that the organisation might not be able to keep up with that pace and get left behind. So if we look within the middle of that framework, after we've identified our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, what we do then is propose initiatives that the organisation might want to adopt that can exploit their strengths and opportunities, invest in success by using the opportunities already available to them that they can use to tackle the weaknesses identified early, mitigate the threats they face using the strengths they already possess, or diffuse potential crises that might occur from the combination of threats and organisational weaknesses that are present. Now, within this final image of the digital initiatives that were proposed to this organisation to overcome those threats and weaknesses and leverage the organisation's opportunities and strengths. So these include the continued exploration and demonstration of AI automation, exploration of blockchain technology, sharing of the digitalisation journey across the sector as part of best practice, attracting talent from within the actual digital technology sector, investing time and resource into digitalisation solutions through pilots or even secondments of staff members to the technology giants such as Google, and developing deeper relationship with digital leaders from other industries, so those telecommunications, financial industries who've kind of got a lead on us on this, and seeing what we can learn from them. So on the screen, I displayed some of the digital initiatives and the scoring. Each digital initiative was scored against its impact upon the organisation, the feasibility of the organisation to be able to adopt this, and the urgency with which the organisation might need to adopt it, which resulted in an overall score. So following the scoring, the initiatives were reordered so that the highest scoring were at the top of the table. So we've got DC1, develop and embed an overarching digital governance and oversight that combines the three strategies and action plans under one umbrella. We've got EO2, continue to explore and demonstrate the use of AI automation and exhibit that to regulators in the wider industry, show the benefits and efficiencies that the organisation has seen due to its use. And then we've got MT2, attract talent from the digital technology sector to spearhead that digitalisation journey at the organisation and encourage engagement between this talent, but also between government, regulators and the wider industry, again, as part of that sharing best practice. So after ranking those digital initiatives, IS1, DC1 and EO3 were recommended for implementation by the organisation. So if we look at those in detail, IS1, by implementing that, we can gather and by gathering and analysing data on the impact and value that current digital technologies provide and could provide if used in other areas of the organisation, it's going to prevent the unproductive adoption of emerging technologies and ensure that current digital technologies are optimised for both operational and financial efficiencies. You find that organisations see something shiny and new within digital technologies and think, oh, we can use that, but they don't think deeply about where that's best utilised and where it can add the best value. With regards to the second initiative, DC1, establishing and embedding digital governance at the organisation would lay the foundation for future digital transformation initiatives. So within the business, you need to ensure that quality of data is high and its use for future decision making is inclusive and legally compliant. It would also encourage an agile and proactive approach to both digitalisation and digital transformation initiatives. So it's the governance that sits underneath that digital mindset and kind of treating digitalisation and digital innovation and digital transformation as business as usual for energy organisations. By doing that, we're also going to start to break down this siloed approach to digital transformation initiatives that this organisation in particular is currently experiencing. And finally, EO3, training all members of the senior leadership team and middle managers on digital leadership was recommended because whilst the organisation has had some success in gaining commitment from its senior leadership team for individual digital transformation initiatives, it's not built upon that momentum. And that's really led to a disconnect between some senior leaders and middle managers and the remaining organisation, which has increased and exacerbated this siloed approach to digitalisation and digital transformation. So you'd got areas of the organisation that were cherry picking new digital technologies and just running with them and deploying them in their areas, and then others that were holding back and not wanting to do anything new because it doesn't quite fit within regulation. So it's a very disparate, fragmented approach, and we need to smooth that out so that we have one size all approach to this digital mindset. Ensuring leaders are digitally literate, open to and can recognise opportunities for future digital transformations is essential to the organisation's digital culture, its digital mindset and its ongoing transformation to digitalisation. Furthermore, having successful digital governance and oversight requires leadership commitment to drive digitalisation organisation-wide. So not implementing this training could actually have a markedly negative impact on the ability of DC1, which was our governance recommendation, to be appropriately fulfilled. So just to wrap everything up, we are in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution. Digital innovation, digital transformations and digitalisation are going to be a key component of achieving net zero. We can't get away from that. Currently, the energy industry is behind the curve on digitalisation, with government and regulators failing to provide the governance and regulatory requirements that is needed. But regardless of that, industry needs to continue to innovate in this space regardless and be at the forefront and spearhead that. We can't wait, else we're going to get left behind. This particular case study highlights the pitfalls of viewing digital transformation and digitalisation as standalone initiatives. We should be adopting that digital mindset. It should be part of our culture. It should be BAU. Digitalisation needs to be embedded across all levels of organisation and appropriate governance created to embed that and support that. Additionally, we need to look at organisations gathering, analysing and using the data that we have. Energy industry, energy sector organisations have so much data, and a lot of them don't utilise it to the best of their abilities. So we have to enable them to identify where existing digital tools can add extra value across the business. And that could be added operational value, added financial value, efficiencies. Ideally, it should be both. Alongside this, and most importantly, senior leadership teams, middle managers need to be empowered with digital literacy. We need to enable them to identify and implement digital transformation opportunities early. They need to recognise where the opportunity is and deploy that. Digitalisation and digital innovation is no longer the remit of the IT team. It should be organisation-wide. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Stella. I've got a whole heap of questions for you, but I will come back to you. I'll give you some time to breathe after that. That stimulated quite a lot of thought around the mindset in an organisation and the willing openness to innovation. So in order to add to that mix, if anybody has any questions, please put them in the chat. And I'm going to move on to Dr. Shobana Sivenendran. And you're going to talk to us about Germany and innovation. So over to you.
Thanks, Kanthi. Good afternoon, everyone. So today I will be talking about innovation in the German energy sector. It is not without its own challenges, but I will be presenting what I believe to be where it's doing particularly well as a way for us to learn from it. So first off, innovation in Germany. Why is innovation important? At the macro level, everything done in the energy sector comes back to the energy trilemma, which is what you see here. And with the energy trilemma, there are certain elements that have particularly affected Germany that have forced it to innovate to be able to continue moving forward. For example, what we have is when it comes to security. The Russian gas crisis brought on by the start of the Russia-Ukraine war in 2022 exposed Germany's heavy dependence on imported gas, 55% of which came from Russia before 2022. This disruption triggered soaring energy prices, strained industrial production, and pushed the economy into a recession, effectively. And to mitigate this shock, Germany had to accelerate its diversification efforts. It invested in LNG infrastructure and secured alternative suppliers from other countries. In the longer term, however, the crisis has reinforced the urgency of Germany's energy transition, and it needs to reduce its reliance on external fossil fuel sources and strengthen resilience against geopolitical risks. The next element of the energy trilemma is sustainability. Germany's currently set a net zero target to achieve greenhouse gas neutrality by 2045. This will naturally require significant innovation. It's already underway, but more needs to be done to close the gap to this target. And finally, we have affordability. This is a question on a lot of people's minds. I know it's also a very hot topic in the UK. In Germany, it's also a very hot topic. And Germany actually has one of the highest electricity costs in Europe, even higher than the UK, in fact. And bringing this down would require innovation, not just in power generation, but also grid management and policy regulation. So one area where digitalization, like Stella had presented previously, could be of great value. So let's go one level deeper now. We saw at the broader level the energy trilemma and what drove innovation for Germany to start with. Here are some examples of how things are changing within Germany, as it is in the rest of the world, and how this change then leads to changes in the energy markets. And so innovating to adapt to these changes is very important. First up, we have that Germany has initiated its coal phase out, and it aims to be completely coal-free by 2038. It also has phased out nuclear fully in 2023. Secondly, we have Germany's renewable energy share. This has grown from under 5% of electricity generation in 1990 to over 50% by 2024. And this has been driven by policy and massive investments in wind and solar power. By 2025, installed renewable capacity is projected to reach around 183 gigawatts, with renewables consistently supplying more than half of Germany's electricity. And it is aiming for 80% by 2030, of which it is well on its way to achieving. Thirdly, Germany participates in the EU emissions trading scheme, which has put a price on carbon dioxide from power plants and industry, penalizing coal and gas economically and favoring zero carbon generation. Additionally, in Germany, they have also introduced a national CO2 price for heating and transport fuels in 2021. This makes fossil fuels less competitive and justifies investments in green hydrogen, e-methane, and other e-fuels for these sectors, since their future carbon-free nature avoids escalating CO2 costs. Fourthly, the consumer behaviors in Germany are also changing, and it's important to change with them. One example of this is the introduction of lithium-ion batteries in homes and cars, of which the uptake has been very large in Germany. And when it's coupled with home solar PVs, shifts demand away from the grid significantly. In 2025, Germany is estimated to have 3 gigawatts of home batteries installed, and the batteries from 1.65 million electric vehicles on the road, having a capacity of about 43 gigawatts in total. This is forecast to grow significantly in the next 10 to 15 years and could be a very large source of flexible storage in the future if it becomes regulatorily possible. And finally, we have new sources of energy demand. One big example of this that's very hot currently is data centers. So data centers have added 3 gigawatts to Germany's power demand. as Germany hosts over 2,000 data centers, making it currently Europe's biggest hub for digital infrastructure. By 2030, this demand is expected to grow further to about 5 gigawatts and potentially even reach 10 gigawatts by 2040. So you see that there are significant changes underway, and we need to be on the ball, ensuring that whatever we do is able to cater to these changes and keep us relevant. Next, I would like to cover some innovations in Germany more specifically. While it's impossible to cover all the innovations, I've selected a snapshot of some key developments, some that follow global trends and some that are unique to Germany. And I've chosen to show them here along the value chain. So first up, we have the power value chain. And secondly, I will also cover the green molecules value chain. In the power value chain, let's start off by looking at renewables. It is somewhere that is undergoing quite significant changes in Germany, like it is in the UK and other parts of the world. In Germany specifically, major utilities like RWE, E.ON, and EnBW, as well as Uniper, have invested in large-scale renewable generation and supporting technologies. RWE, which is historically a coal-based utility, has shifted its portfolio to renewables and storage significantly. The company has over 150 renewable projects, wind, solar, and batteries under construction globally. And its flagship project is the North Sea Cluster, which is 4 offshore wind farms with a total capacity of 1.6 gigawatts in German waters, scheduled for operation by 2027. E.ON, another big player, is now focusing on energy networks, retail, and renewable integration. E.ON is investing significantly to modernize grids for electrification and renewable growth. While its own renewable generation is modest, it facilitates distributed renewable adoption, such as connecting millions of solar roofs and wind farms to its 1.8 million kilometer distribution network. And E.ON's strategy underscores innovation in grid digitalization and smart integration of new generation, rather than building central plants. German firms are active in advancing wind and solar technology as well. One example of this is Siemens Gamesa, which has pioneered offshore wind turbines above 10 megawatts in capacity. Meanwhile, new market entrants and startups have innovated in areas like virtual power plants. This is where software is used to aggregate many small renewable and storage units to act as one giant virtual power plant in the cloud. As a result of the increasing renewables mix, on the other side, grid operators are also innovating for better renewables integration. So here are a few examples of innovations in the grid space. 50 Hertz, which serves Northeast Germany, has set a bold target to have its grid region 100% supplied by renewables by 2032. This is up from 60% in 2020. And in order to enable this, 50 Hertz is upgrading its network with new technologies and cross-sector solutions. For example, 50 Hertz deployed advanced static synchronous compensator systems near Berlin for voltage control, supporting grid stability as conventional synchronous plants retire. It also invests in dynamic line rating and other digital tools to maximize the use of existing power lines. TSOs like Transnet, BW, and Tenet are also building massive battery installations known as grid boosters. In 2024, Transnet BW began constructing a 250 megawatt battery, and this battery will act as a reserve to instantly supply power if a transmission line or a plant fails, instead of keeping conventional plants idling in standby. By freeing up transmission capacity, such grid boosters let more renewable energy flow and reduce the need for costly grid expansions. Tenet is also implementing the same grid booster with 200 megawatt batteries in northern Germany. This is an innovation in grid operation, using storage as a transmission asset. Next, to transport wind power from the north to industrial South Germany, TSOs are laying high voltage DC corridors with innovative technology. For example, Amprion's project is a 2 gigawatt HVDC line from the North Sea to the Ruhr region in central South Germany. And HVDC allows efficient long-distance transmission with lower losses and is crucial for integrating offshore wind. TenneT has also introduced a 2 gigawatt offshore grid standard. This is up from its earlier standard of 0.9 gigawatts, reducing the cost per megawatt for its transmission connections. In November 2024, TenneT kicked off construction of the first 2 gigawatt offshore converter to accelerate wind connection timelines. By adopting multi-terminal HVDC and international interconnectors, the transmission operators are building a flexible cross-border renewable grid. Across electric grids, operators are deploying advanced software and control innovations as well. For example, TenneT has led a pilot using blockchain-coordinated home batteries to help balance the grid in real time. Load management and smart metering are being rolled out to shift demand peaks, and these solutions are essential as renewable supply fluctuates. They represent an important innovation layer atop the physical grid. These innovations are in fact already paying off. In 2025, the volume of required redispatch measures fell by 12%, while lower fuel prices pushed down costs by 17% compared to 2024. As renewables take center stage, innovation also happens in the design of new backup generation. And here we have Germany's plan for new hydrogen-ready gas generation. It aims to build 20 gigawatts of capacity in total that will serve as peaking plants when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining. Importantly, these are being specified as hydrogen capable. This ensures new plants built for security of supply do not lock in fossil fuels. It's a policy-driven innovation. The economy minister under Katharina Reiche in 2025 explicitly tied new capacity to flexibility and the future use of green gases. In summary, Germany's power generation innovation is a story of scaling up renewables onshore and offshore, enhancing grid capacity and intelligence, and ensuring reliable backup. The result is a rapidly decarbonizing power sector that still meets the needs of an industrial economy. A critical foundation before we turn to green molecules, which enable decarbonization beyond the power sector. And now let's look at some innovations along the green molecules value chain in Germany. One innovation falls under Uniper's belt, where Uniper is developing the Green Wilhelmshaven hydrogen hub on Germany's North Sea coast. The project includes a 200 megawatt electrolyzer with plans to expand to 1 gigawatt by the early 2030s. Powered by offshore wind, each 100 megawatt unit can produce about 50 tons of green hydrogen per day. The hub will also feature an import terminal for green ammonia and cracking facilities to convert it back to hydrogen. Uniper has signed a preliminary offtake agreement with Salzgitter to deliver 20,000 tons of hydrogen annually for green steel production once the expansion is complete. Furthermore, nearby natural gas caverns are being converted for hydrogen storage with funding secured in 2022. By integrating production, imports, storage, and industrial use, Wilhelmshaven exemplifies technical and commercial innovation in Germany's hydrogen economy. Next up, I thought it would be good to cover the Hydrogen Acceleration Act. It's a piece of regulatory innovation. It was formally adopted by the federal cabinet in October this year, and it does need to pass through further levels of government before coming into action. But it is innovative in that it aims to accelerate the scale-up of hydrogen in Germany, especially renewable hydrogen, by streamlining planning approval and procurement processes. It introduces faster approval timelines, limits on appeals, digitalization requirements, and simplified procedures for hydrogen production, storage, transport, import, and related infrastructure like pipelines, port terminals, ammonia cracking, and power lines. And then we have the fuels and derivatives, where Germany is active in and also a frontrunner globally. Ammonia is being pursued mainly as a hydrogen carrier and for use in shipping or possibly as a fuel for power plants. Aside from Uniper's planned ammonia import terminal in Wilhelmshaven, companies like RWE are studying ammonia cracking technology to retrieve hydrogen and co-firing ammonia in coal or gas turbines. Additionally, a project under a company by the name of Hy2Gen is pioneering Germany's industrial power-to-methane sector. It was the world's first plant to produce e-methane from renewable electricity and captured CO2 at industrial scale. To date, the facility remains the largest operational power-to-methane site globally. And in May 2025, it became the first plant in Germany to receive renewables RFNBO certification. RFNBO stands for Renewable Fuels of Non-Biological Origin. It's a measure introduced by the EU to ensure that these fuels are indeed green and produced from renewable sources. This enables it to supply emerging markets like maritime shipping with e-methane fuel. This project is a flagship of Germany's energy transition, demonstrating how sector coupling, which is the linking of renewable electricity with the gas grid and transport fuels, can enable decarbonization of hard-to-abate sectors. Overall, Germany's exploration of green molecules is quite comprehensive. Store electricity as hydrogen for industry and power, as methane for grid storage, as ammonia for transports and imports, and as synthetic fuels for transport. Each pathway has specific pilot projects and industrial prototypes in the country, many of which are among the first of the kind in the world. Now, I thought it would be nice to cover a little bit more detail of one particular project. And here I have selected a project by Uniper in Bad Lauchstädt in Germany. The Bad Lauchstädt Energy Park in central Germany is a pioneering green hydrogen project by Uniper centered around a 30-megawatt electrolyzer. Commissioning of the plant is expected by the end of this year, and once operational, it will generate up to 4,000 tons of green hydrogen per year, supplying a nearby chemical complex, which includes a Total Energies refinery. This is a real-world example of scalable hydrogen technology and infrastructure as part of a broader pan-European strategy. It demonstrates the integration of the full hydrogen value chain, from renewable electricity generation to hydrogen production, storage, transport, and industrial use, tested in a single real-world laboratory. It is a blueprint for regional decarbonization, demonstrating how legacy chemical infrastructure can be transformed for clean energy. It also demonstrates the repurposing of existing gas infrastructure, including a 25-kilometer former natural gas pipeline converted for hydrogen transport to the Total Energies refinery. It is one of the early examples of industrial-scale green hydrogen production using a 30-megawatt pressurized alkaline electrolyzer developed by Sunfire, which is also a German company. It features a modular electrolyzer design, which allows it to be easily scaled up. It also incorporates smart grid coordination between the wind farm output and the electrolyzer load profile to maximize efficiency and uptime. And in the future, there are plans for an underground hydrogen storage facility nearby in specially designed salt caverns to buffer seasonal energy fluctuations. And this here is, in fact, a real photo of the site as it is close to commercialization now. So back to the question that we had at the start of this session. Why innovate? Well, from a public perspective, the energy trilemma is the key guiding principle. Keep the lights on, keep the bills down, whilst meeting sustainability goals to ensure we still have a world to live in for decades and centuries to come. From a private sector perspective, on top of the energy trilemma, it's also important to ensure that the companies are able to stay relevant. So stay ahead of the competition stay relevant in a world that is changing, and ensure a steady income stream in the future. At Uniper, for example, as well as other utilities, I'm sure, we know we have the gas business for the next 10 to 15 years, but we're innovating now to ensure that we've covered all bases for what comes after. That's all for me today. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I'm happy to answer questions now.
Thank you very much, Shobana. Sorry, I lost my mouse for a minute. Now there were two really fascinating presentations, completely different but so related. One is the reluctance to innovate, and the other is some really interesting examples of where innovation is taking place at the moment. So thank you for sharing that. Has anybody here that's attending got any questions for our speakers today? Firstly. Well, if not, I've got a couple of questions for you both. Firstly, for Stella, you talked about the immaturity in the context of digitalization. Did your case study company, or are companies, as far as you're aware of, actually assessing the capability of the organizational culture to adopt digital alternatives, or are they just implementing projects in the fragmented way you described?
I think they implement projects in a fragmented way, but then you have the IT team who is trying to drive forward that culture, but they're in isolation and they need to bring the rest of the organisation along with them. It has to be a culture across the organisation, and I think within organisations and that particular case study, there's this perception that anything to do with digital or digital innovation is the remit of the IT team, and that although they use digital tools every day, they're not making that link to how it can make their jobs easier, add value. They kind of see it as, well, we'll just ask the IT team to do some sort of transformation project. It's such a shame.
So it's very much departmentalized. Thank you, Stella. One for you, Shobana. You said at the outset that energy costs were much higher in Germany and there would be benefit from the digitalization approach. Could you expand on that a little bit further?
Yeah, sure. So it seems a little counterintuitive that Germany has such a big proportion of renewables in the mix, and yet energy bills are still very high. And in fact, the electricity prices have been going down because of the increasing renewables percentage. However, the additional costs in the bills, which come from the cost of balancing the grid with more renewables in the system and other taxes and levies, as a result of all of this additional work, is what is contributing to the very high bills. And this is why digitalization is important. And this is why some of the examples I mentioned of the transmission operators implementing these digital solutions to make their operation more efficient. It means that basically they don't need to overcompensate in the markets, which adds costs, which is then passed on to the consumers. And it means that they can also make decisions more efficiently, so even maximizing the capabilities of the grid itself from a physical perspective to bring costs down. And it seems that this is starting to work in Germany, at least from the last year.
Okay, that's fascinating. Thank you. We've got a question from Matt, who's observing today. And it was one I was going to ask you, Stella, because you were talking very much around the corporate mindset was driven by the regulatory incentives. So therefore, because there wasn't a regulatory incentive, therefore the appetite to adopt wasn't there. So this is a question for both of you. And it's, what do regulators or regulations need to do to promote innovation, its adoption and sustainability? So
Shall I go first?
yes, go.
I think Ofgem, which is the regulator that I'm familiar with, they have tried to promote innovation. We had specific innovation funds through GD1 and GD2, and they used the Rio framework, but it was very much bounded to be on specifics. So, and I understand you need to have guardrails in place, but digitalisation wasn't put to the top of that list. I think one of the things that we need from regulators is guidelines and regulation about how we should be moving forward. I mean, one of the things that we need to do is share more data across organisations to look at how we can effectively deliver a whole system net zero future. And there's nothing there to show how we would share that data, what type of data we should share, how often we should be sharing it, what that should be used for. And I think we need those kind of guardrails putting in place by our regulators to not incentivize us, but to make us do it.
Okay, interesting. Shobana, what's your view? You're on mute at the moment.
Sorry. I agree with Stella in that certain incentives need to be provided by government to spearhead this. And adding to that, I think it's important within a company context that these regulations also help make the business models for these new innovative approaches possible. And I think the UK has done particularly well when it comes to hydrogen. The UK government is very proactive, and it has these hydrogen allocation rounds, for example, that are quite unique to the country. And in Germany, they're now picking up on the importance of regulation and starting to put things in place like this Hydrogen Acceleration Act, and also introducing other sorts of funding mechanisms to support hydrogen-related projects. So in Uniper, the reason why some of these pilot scale projects are even possible is because it's partially funded by grants from the government.
Okay, thank you. I see that Matt has shared what the water industry are doing, so I shall read that with interest after this session. I have one last question for you both, which is around leadership and organizational sharing in terms of, because we're talking about regulation making organizations do things. And in your presentation, Stella, you talked about training necessary for senior leaders and middle managers. So how much of that is really going on, or is digitization just seen as things to make the net zero happen? So is that the imperative? Who'd like to go first?
I think what I see is that if it's cybersecurity, the leadership team are completely on board. They understand the importance of it, and they will put all their resources into making sure that cybersecurity is in place. But when it comes to anything beyond that, there's a disconnect between the money that they're spending on these digital tools and digital innovations and the value that can bring. And I think because they don't have the understanding that people who work in Google have, for instance, about the value added that it could bring, it's really difficult to get them on board to sign off on these things. And sometimes by the time you've got them on board, it's like yesterday's news and something else has come along that would be even better. So I think there's definitely a need, even at board level, to have people who have that digital knowledge, that digital skill, that digital experience, actually advising companies what they need to be implementing and how and why.
Great answer. It's a great conclusion for this session. Shobana, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I can talk to what is happening at Uniper, and it very much does come from the senior management level, this push to change. So one, it's embedded in our strategy to transition from traditional coal and gas to renewables and other clean sources of energy. And secondly, our senior management does a really good job of being in very close contact with the teams in Uniper and consistently sharing this message of the need to innovate and to change. And the most recent example being the impact of AI and how we can use that to be more efficient in the workplace. And that's something that's now become a core part of how Uniper seeks to do things. And it's really from this constant engagement by the senior management with each of the teams, including my innovation team as well. So I think there a good job is being done. I think the challenge then comes when it comes to certain areas that have worked very consistently on areas that don't require innovation. There a very big mindset change is required. And the way we're approaching it at Uniper is kind of bringing these teams away from operating in silos and having them interact more with the teams that are bringing the innovation into the company. For example, my team to initiate this mindset change as well. And it takes time naturally, but I think it's the only way to do it.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. So in conclusion, I'd say that we need education, mindset, and appetite for change in order to embrace innovation. So with that, I'm going to thank you all for attending. I'm going to thank Stella and Shobana for your presentations. They've been absolutely fascinating, and I'll share the link on YouTube as soon as we have it. So thank you for your time, everyone, and do come back for our next presentation in January. Okay, thank you.